Before we begin, allow your shoulders to soften and your breathing to slow. There is no urgency here, no deadline to meet. Tonight, you are invited into a quieter world, one where time itself is not something chased, but something patiently shaped, guided, and listened to. Imagine yourself in 18th century London, long before electric light or digital precision. The city is alive, yes, but uneven, unpredictable, and often loud. Yet tucked away along narrow streets and above modest storefronts are places of remarkable calm. Inside these small workshops, time does not rush forward, it ticks. This is the world of the clockmaker. Here, your universe is not measured in miles or crowds, but in millimeters. Your greatest challenge is not strength, but steadiness. Your enemies are not rivals, but dust, vibration, and haste. Even your own heartbeat, subtle, constant, can feel like an interruption. Tonight's journey explores why, in such a world, you would not last a single day. Not because the work is dramatic, not because it is violent, but because it demands something rare: sustained patience, absolute focus, and a willingness to move at the pace of time itself. So imagine yourself stepping inside a small London workshop as dawn approaches. The city is waking, but here, time is already at work. The first thing that would break you isn't the work itself, but the silence, or rather, the lack of it. The constant, rhythmic ticking of dozens of clocks, all slightly out of sync, creates a soundscape that is anything but silent. It's a chorus of tiny heartbeats, a mechanical symphony that worms its way into your brain. At first, it might seem calming, a gentle reminder of the passage of time. But after an hour, 2 hours, it becomes a maddening, incessant chatter. Each tick is a demand, a question. Is that one too fast? Is this one slowing down? Your ears, accustomed to the varied noises of the modern world, would strain to find a pattern, a harmony. But there is none. Only the relentless, overlapping pulse of 100 tiny machines, each counting the seconds of your slowly unraveling sanity. You would try to focus, but the sound would pull you back, a constant distraction that you can't tune out. Before your first cup of wheat boiled tea is even finished, you'd be desperate for a moment of true quiet, a quiet that will not come. Let's say you somehow manage to endure the relentless ticking. Your next challenge arrives with the first ray of sunlight. Your master hands you a task that sounds simple: polish a single brass gear. He hands you a small piece of metal, no bigger than your thumbnail, and a soft cloth. Easy, right? But this isn't just about making it shiny. It's about achieving a perfect, mirror-like finish without altering its dimensions by even a fraction of a millimeter. You'd sit at your bench, the weak light from the window your only guide. You begin to rub, and rub, and rub. Your arm starts to ache. Your fingers cramp. You hold it up to the light, squinting. It looks shiny, sure, but the master takes it, holds it under a loupe, a small magnifying glass, and shakes his head. He points to a microscopic scratch, a tiny imperfection that your modern eye would never have noticed. He tells you to start again. This one piece, this single gear, will be your entire morning. The repetitive motion, the intense focus, the constant self-critique is a form of meditation, but one that your restless, 21st century mind is not equipped for. You're used to instant results, to progress you can see. Here, progress is measured in the absence of flaws, a slow, painstaking process of elimination. Your patience, already frayed by the ticking, would snap. Now imagine it's midday. The London streets outside are a cacophony of horse-drawn carts, street vendors, and shouting. But inside your little workshop, another, more subtle enemy is at play: dust. To us, dust is a minor annoyance, something we wipe away without a second thought. To an 18th century clockmaker, dust is a monster. A single speck of dust, invisible to the naked eye, can jam a delicate gear train, stop a pendulum, or throw off the timekeeping by minutes a day. Your every movement must be deliberate, slow, and careful. You can't just brush something off your workbench. You must lift it, clean under it, and place it back with surgical precision. The very air you breathe is a threat. A cough, a sneeze, could undo hours of work by sending a cloud of microscopic particles onto a nearly finished movement. You'd learn to hold your breath as you place a tiny screw, to move with a stillness that feels unnatural. We live in a world where we can afford to be messy, to be casual. The clockmaker's world has no such luxury. Every surface, every tool, every action is governed by the fight against this invisible invader. The mental load of being so constantly, perfectly clean and still would be exhausting. Perhaps you've made it to the afternoon. Your spirit bruised, but not yet broken. Now comes the real test, the assembly. Before you is a constellation of hundreds of tiny, hand-filed gears, levers, and springs. Your task is to put them together. There are no instructions, no YouTube tutorials. Your only guide is the master's verbal direction and the memory of watching him do it once before. You pick up a pair of tweezers to place a minuscule pin into an equally minuscule hole. Your hand trembles. The pin, which you spin and are filing to the perfect size, slips from the tweezers and vanishes onto the dusty floorboards. You spend the next half hour on your hands and knees, sifting through dirt and grime, your heart pounding with frustration. You find it, clean it, and try again. This time, you get the pen in place, but as you try to fit the next gear, you realize you've put the first one in backward. You have to take it apart and start over. This isn't like building with Legos, where pieces snap together. This is a three-dimensional puzzle where every component affects every other, where tolerances are measured in the width of a human hair. The sheer mental fortitude required to keep track of this intricate dance of parts, to troubleshoot problems without getting angry, to accept that one tiny mistake means hours of rework, that is the true craft. Your brain, wired for multitasking and quick fixes, would feel like it's short-circuiting. The overwhelming complexity and the unforgiving nature of the work would be your breaking point. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the workshop, you face your final, insurmountable hurdle, your own body. All day, you've been hunched over a bench, squinting in the dim light of a candle or a grimy window. Your back screams in protest. Your neck is a knot of tension. Your eyes burn from the strain of focusing on objects just inches from your face. Modern life has not prepared you for this physical ordeal. We have ergonomic chairs, bright, adjustable lighting, and the luxury of taking breaks to stretch and walk around. The 18th century clockmaker had a wooden stool and the iron will to ignore his own discomfort. His body was a tool, conditioned over years to endure the static, cramped posture required for his craft. Your body, by contrast, is accustomed to movement and comfort. The constant, low-grade pain would be more than just a distraction. It would degrade your ability to perform the delicate tasks required. The steadiness of your hand would falter, your focus would wander, and every tick of the clocks around you would feel like a countdown to your inevitable failure. You wouldn't last a day, not because you lack skill, but because your body would betray you long before you had a chance to learn. So there you have it, the noise, the mind-numbing repetition, the war on dust, the maddening complexity, and the sheer physical toll. Any one of these would be enough to send most of us running from the small London workshop. It's a world that demanded a kind of monastic devotion, a deep and abiding patience that is almost alien to our modern sensibilities. These artisans weren't just building machines to tell time. They were living in a different relationship with it. They understood that precision and beauty couldn't be rushed. They were born from stillness, focus, and 1,000 tiny, deliberate actions. So the next time you glance at a clock, whether it's on your phone or on a wall, take a moment to appreciate the quiet, patient world from which the concept was born. It's a world we might admire, but one in which very few of us could ever hope to survive. The morning does not announce itself loudly in this part of London. It arrives gradually, almost reluctantly, through narrow streets still damp from the night air. Inside the clockmaker's shop, the first sign of day is a faint blue light seeping through the window panes, filtered by glass that has never been perfectly flat. The light settles gently across the room, resting on surfaces that have grown familiar with patience. It touches the wooden workbench first, its surface scarred with shallow grooves. darkened by years of oil, and polished smooth where hands have rested thousands of times. These marks are not flaws. They are records, quiet evidence of repetition. You pause at the doorway for a moment longer than necessary. Habit has taught you that rushing the beginning of the day rarely leads to precision later. The shop feels cool, the air still holding the night's chill. Stone walls release their cold slowly, and the faint warmth of yesterday's candle has long since faded. As you step inside, the smell becomes clearer. It is not unpleasant, a delicate blend of fine clock oil, warm brass, and old wood. A scent that suggests care rather than labor, attention rather than effort. The oil is used sparingly here, just enough to ease movement, never enough to invite dust. Brass filings catch the light and small, dull glimmers on the bench, tiny reminders that even metal yields when treated patiently. You move toward the drawers beneath the bench. Each one slides open with a muted sound, wood against wood. Inside, order reigns. Screws are sorted not just by size, but by thread and purpose. Springs are wrapped carefully, never allowed to rest under tension longer than necessary. Pins are aligned like quiet rows of punctuation, waiting to be placed precisely where meaning requires them. Sorting these pieces is not merely preparation, it is orientation. Your hands learn the scale of the day's work through touch. The pads of your fingers adjust to objects so small they seem almost imaginary. At first, everything feels fragile. With time, that fragility becomes familiar, even reassuring. You sit, drawing the stool closer to the bench. It creaks softly, an old sound, predictable, comforting. You reach for the magnifying glass and lift it slowly, pressing it to your eye. Instantly, the world changes. What was once neat becomes complex. What was once smooth becomes textured. A gear tooth reveals minute wear. A screw head shows the faintest imperfection from an earlier repair. Nothing hides under magnification. Nothing forgives assumption. You breathe shallowly now, without consciously deciding to. Even breath can move parts that measure fractions of a millimeter. Your heartbeat feels louder than it should, as though it might disturb the balance of the room. And then there is the soundscape. At first, it seems uniform, a constant ticking, steady and unbroken. But as your awareness settles, distinctions emerge. One pendulum lags slightly behind its neighbor. A table clock ticks faster than it should, eager, impatient. A pocket watch pauses imperceptibly between beats, as if uncertain. The workshop does not tick as one. It converses. Each clock speaks in its own rhythm, and your task before any tool is lifted is to listen. Listening is part of the morning ritual. It aligns the mind with the pace required for the day. It reminds you that forcing time forward never improves its accuracy. Outside, London continues to wait. Somewhere, a horse snorts. A cart rattles over cobblestones. A vendor calls out the morning's bread. These sounds drift in faintly, softened by walls and distance, like echoes from a world that moves too quickly to notice its own passing. Inside the shop, time behaves differently. Dotted loops. It repeats. It insists on attention. You adjust your posture, resting your elbows lightly, careful not to jostle the bench. You pick up a single screw, barely visible even under the lens, and roll it gently between tweezers. Its weight is negligible, yet it carries responsibility. Placed incorrectly, it can alter a clock's rhythm by seconds each day. Seconds that accumulate, seconds that matter. This is how the morning begins. Not with grand intention, not with ambition, but with stillness. Already, you sense the challenge, not the difficulty of the work, but the demand it places on your body and mind. To remain steady, to resist haste, to accept that progress here is measured not in hours past, but in movements controlled. Think about our modern lives for a moment. We're always trying to save time, to hack our productivity, to squeeze more into every minute. We use apps to manage our schedules. We multitask constantly, and we often feel a low-grade anxiety that we're falling behind. But in this old workshop, the relationship with time is completely different. It's not an enemy to be conquered. It's a medium to be understood. The goal isn't to work faster, but to work with such focus that time itself seems to slow down. This idea of slowing down, of single tasking, is becoming more and more appealing in our hyper-connected world. People are discovering crafts like woodworking, knitting, or pottery. They're finding joy in activities that demand patience and precision. It's a form of mindfulness, a way to quiet the noise and connect with something tangible. The clockmaker's focus isn't just about fixing a mechanism. It's about entering a state of flow, where the self and the task become one. The rest of the world fades away, and all that exists is the delicate dance of tools and tiny components. This kind of deep work can be incredibly restorative. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the constant rush, try dedicating a small amount of time to one single thing. It could be as simple as brewing a cup of tea with intention, truly focusing on each step of the process. Or maybe it's sketching, writing, or just listening to a piece of music without any other distractions. These small acts of deliberate focus are like a reset button for the mind. They remind us that we have control over our attention, even when the world is pulling us in 1,000 different directions. This workshop is more than just a place of business. It's a sanctuary. It's a physical reminder that there's another way to exist, a way that values depth over speed and quality over quantity. The scratches on the workbench are not just damage. They are a history of focus. The sword screws are not just organization. They are a testament to a disciplined mind. Every element in this room speaks of a philosophy that has been almost forgotten in the modern era. As the day progresses, the light in the shop will change. The blue morning will soften into a warmer, golden afternoon light. But the rhythm inside will remain constant. The steady hand, the focused eye, the patient heart. The work is a form of meditation. Each tiny adjustment, each clean gear, each drop of oil is an act of care. It's a dialogue between the creator and the creation. The clockmaker doesn't just repair the clock. The clock, in turn, teaches the clockmaker about patience and the nature of time itself. It's a beautiful exchange. In a world obsessed with the future and haunted by the past, the clockmaker's world is rooted firmly in the present moment. That single, tiny screw held in the tweezers is the entire universe. And giving it your full, undivided attention is the most important thing you can do. It's a lesson that extends far beyond the walls of this shop. Whatever your work is, whatever your passion is, approaching it with this level of presence can transform it from a task into an art. So, the next time you glance at a clock, perhaps you'll think of this. Behind the simple act of telling time, there can be a whole world of patience, precision, and profound focus. A quiet rebellion against the relentless rush of modern life. The clocks continue to tick, the blue light slowly brightens, and the day settles into its quiet, exacting rhythm. As the blue morning light grows steadier, my attention shifts naturally from just watching to doing. This transition is never abrupt. In a clockmaker's world, even beginnings must be eased into, like setting a pendulum gently in motion. I select a small tray and place it on my workbench, making sure it sits perfectly flat. Inside rests a single gear brass, worn and incomplete. One of its teeth has been damaged over years of use, shaved down not by some big catastrophe, but by countless tiny frictions. It isn't broken in a dramatic way, it's just tired. This is often how timepieces fail. I lift a fine file, its handle smoothed by long familiarity, and bring my magnifying glass closer. The feel's teeth are so fine they almost feel silky. Filing a gear tooth isn't about correcting a mistake, it's about restoration. I'm removing almost nothing, just enough to bring the tooth back into harmony with its neighbors. The motion is slow, forward, pause. Withdraw, each stroke is deliberate, guided more by feel than by what I can see. I'm listening as much as I'm looking, sensing the subtle vibration through the tool. Too much pressure would remove material that can never be replaced. Too little would leave the imbalance unresolved. Time, in this space, is adjusted one breath at a time. Once I'm satisfied, I set the gear aside and turn to the mainspring. It rests coiled tightly within its barrel, a source of quiet power. Even when it's still, it demands respect. The mainspring stores energy patiently, releasing it gradually to animate the entire mechanism. If you mishandle it, it can unravel with surprising force, undoing hours of careful work in a single moment. I ease it free slowly, controlling its tension with practiced hands. The metal resists at first, then it yields, settling into a more relaxed curve. The sound it makes is subtle, a faint whisper of metal adjusting, almost like a sigh released after being held. Next, oil is applied, but very sparingly. A single drop, placed precisely, and spread thinly with the tip of a pen. Too much oil attracts dust, too little invites friction. Balance, always balance, is the guiding principle. Now for the enameled dial. It's white, glossy, and deceptively fragile. It bears the painted numerals that allow us to read the language of gears and springs. I polish it gently with a soft cloth, careful to avoid the delicate hands resting nearby. The surface reflects the workshop light, faintly, almost like still water. Every smudge shows, every scratch remains forever. This dial isn't just for decoration. It is the face that time presents to the world. Its clarity matters, with the dial prepared. My focus turns to the very heart of the mechanism, the escapement. This is where control lies. The escapement governs how energy flows, dividing it into measured increments, allowing the clock to move forward in precise steps rather than rushing uncontrollably. Assembling it requires absolute CALM. I align the anchor, adjust the pallet stones, and test the interaction with the escape. Well, the movement is microscopic, yet decisive. A fraction too much friction, and the clock will stall. Too little, and it will race ahead. At last, everything is in place. I hold the watch carefully, poised right between stillness and motion. With a gentle nudge, I release the tension. There is a pause, and then tick. A single beat, dot clear, dot certain. Another follows, dot tick, dot tick. The sound is small, but it fills the entire room. This is the moment every clockmaker listens for, not for excitement or triumph, but for confirmation. The rhythm settles, neither hurried nor hesitant. It simply continues around me. The other clocks maintain their own conversations, welcoming this newcomer into their layered chorus. I set the watch aside to observe, letting it run, watching for any inconsistency, listening for any deviation. This is how progress is made here, quietly, incrementally. I can already feel it, the strain of sustained attention, the careful control of my breath, the suppression of impatience. The craft doesn't punish mistakes loudly. It corrects them slowly, often invisibly. And this is why, for most people, a single day of this would be more than enough. The work doesn't end. It repeats. It asks for the same care again and again. Indifferent to whether you're tired or distracted, the clocks continue to tick. The light continues to shift, and time, shaped gently by my hands, moves forward one measured beat at a time. As the steady ticking of your workshop continues, your mind begins to wander, slowly and naturally, toward a question that has occupied clockmakers, sailors, and kings for centuries. It's not a loud question. It doesn't announce itself. It simply lingers, much like the faint hum beneath the rhythm of the clocks. How, exactly, does one know where they are? In the early 18th century, this question carried immense weight. Finding your latitude was relatively easy. You could measure the height of the sun or familiar stars above the horizon. But longitude, your east-west position, remained a ghost. It depended entirely on time accurate, unwavering time, kept across vast distances and unpredictable conditions. For sailors, this wasn't just an academic puzzle. It was a matter of life and death. Ships vanished. Crews were lost. Entire fortunes dissolved into salt water and fog. The sea did not forgive approximation. And yet, here in London, far from crashing waves and rolling decks, the solution seemed deceptively small. A clock. Or rather, a clock that could survive motion, moisture, temperature changes, and months of travel without losing its steady rhythm. This was where John Harrison entered the story. He wasn't a celebrated figure at first, but a quiet, persistent presence. He wasn't born into prestige or a grand workshop. Instead, he arrived with patience, with dust under his nails, and an unwavering belief that time could be tamed more precisely than anyone yet imagined. You can almost picture him now, bent over a workbench, much like this one. The same posture, the same stillness. His workshop, too, would have smelled of oil and metal, of effort and repetition. He began not with brass, but with wood, crafting clocks that compensated for temperature changes through clever geometry. Rather than expensive materials, wood, being flexible and forgiving, expanded and contracted predictably. Harrison understood this intuitively. Where others saw limitation, he saw a rhythm. His early clocks didn't rely on pendulums, which were useless on a swaying ship. Instead, he devised mechanisms that balanced opposing forces, allowing the timekeeper to remain stable even as the world around it moved. This innovation wasn't born of haste. It emerged from years of quiet refinement. Harrison's pursuit of a seaworthy clock, what we now call a marine chronometer, spanned decades, not because he was slow, but because precision demands patience. Each version improved upon the last by almost imperceptible degrees. Errors were measured in seconds per day, then seconds per week, then fractions even smaller still. In the context of longitude, these tiny gains were monumental. A time difference of just 4 minutes meant a ship was 1 degree of longitude off course. A few seconds could place a vessel miles away from its intended position. Time, once again, revealed itself as both generous and unforgiving. The British government, desperate for a solution, offered the Longitude Prize, a vast sum of money to encourage innovation. But even as Harrison's devices proved astonishingly effective on treacherous sea voyages, official recognition came reluctantly. Committees debated, trials were repeated, doubts lingered. It seemed that accuracy alone wasn't enough. It had to be believed. Back in the quiet of the workshop, the story settles around you like dust. You glance at the clocks on the walls, each one quietly, keeping its own promise. None of these will ever sail across an ocean. None will face storms or salt air. And yet, their very existence traces back to this same fundamental question. How do you divide time so faithfully that it can guide us through uncertainty? The pendulum swing, once thought to be the ultimate solution, now feels fragile. It requires stillness. It demands cooperation from the world. Harrison's work suggested something different, that timekeeping must adapt, that it must endure disturbance rather than simply avoid it. You pick up a small balance wheel and let it rotate gently between your fingers. It turns, slows, and stops. Simple, unassuming, and yet, in its controlled oscillation lies the answer to historic voyages, to accurate maps, to the shrinking of our world. The clocks around you continue their layered cadence, each beat echoing a decision made long ago by someone who refused to accept approximation. John Harrison never sought drama. He sought consistency, and in a craft where even your own heartbeat can feel like an interruption. Consistency is the rarest achievement of all. As the afternoon light begins to soften, the mystery doesn't resolve itself completely. It doesn't need to. The answer isn't a single invention, but a mindset, a willingness to spend a lifetime perfecting something most people will never even notice. The ticking continues. The problem of longitude fades gently into history, and you return, once again, to the bench, where time waits patiently to be shaped. As the name John Harrison fades from your thoughts, it doesn't disappear, but settles into the background, like the chime of a clock heard from another room. What remains is the object itself, the mechanism, the quiet, authoritative motion repeated without deviation. Before the era of perfectly refined balance wheels, before springs learned to resist the changing moods of temperature and motion, there was the pendulum. In the corner of the workshop stands a tall case clock, its wooden frame darkened by years of polishing hands and drifting dust. Through the glass panel, you see a long metal rod descending toward a circular brass bob. It moves steadily, unhurried, passing through the same invisible corridor of air again and again. Left dot right dot left dot right. A motion so familiar that your eyes begin to follow it without even trying. Imagine standing there, watching it not for seconds, But for minutes, nothing changes. And yet, the longer you look, the more you realize how much must remain unchanged for this simple movement to continue. The room must stay calm. The air must be still. The floor must not tremble. The temperature must not stray too far from what it was when the clock was last adjusted. The pendulum is a device that thrives on stability and quietly punishes any disturbance. When pendulum clocks first appeared, they seemed miraculous. Here was time made visible, governed by gravity itself rather than guesswork. The swing was natural, predictable, obedient to physical law. It promised a world where hours could be trusted, where appointments could be kept, where prayer, labor, and rest could follow an agreed-upon rhythm. But this promise came with conditions. You learn this slowly, not from books, but from experience. A pendulum clock that keeps perfect time one day might lose a few seconds the next. Not because it's broken, and not because it's poorly made, but because the night was colder, because rain cooled the stone walls of the house, because the metal rod contracted just enough to shorten its length, speeding up the swing almost imperceptibly. Almost not in the world of clocks. Almost matters a great deal. You can imagine the early clockmakers discovering this truth not with excitement, but with a quiet, gnawing frustration. They would adjust the length of the pendulum with incredible care, record the time, and return hours later. Then again the next day, each visit would reveal a tiny betrayal, a few seconds gained, a few seconds lost. Time was slipping, not dramatically, but persistently. The pendulum teaches humility. Its motion appears perfect, but it is sensitive in ways the human body rarely is. A footstep too heavy nearby can disturb its rhythm. A door closing firmly down the street can send a faint vibration through the floorboards. Even the passing of a carriage outside wooden wheels striking stone can ripple upward through the building and reach the clock as delicate suspension. Listen more closely now. The tick and the tock, they sound identical, but they are not. One carries the weight of gravity pulling the pendulum downward. The other carries its return. They are companions, not twins. Each second is made of a tiny imbalance being corrected. The great challenge for pendulum clocks was never how to make them swing, it was how to make them ignore the world around them. Clockmakers experimented endlessly to solve this problem. They combined different metals with different expansion rates, creating what are called gridiron pendulums. These were designed so that one metal would lengthen while the other shortened in response to temperature changes. Attempting to cancel each other out, brass and steel were forced to work together, as neither could be trusted on its own. Other clockmakers tried mercury pendulums, using a container of liquid mercury as the bob. As the pendulum rod contracted in the cold, the mercury would rise within its container, keeping the center of mass stable. None of these solutions were quick fixes. Each one required observation measured not in minutes, but in weeks, even months. Adjustments were made with painstaking care, and then the clock was left untouched. Its performance would be watched from a distance, its deviation noted quietly in a ledger. There was no way to force accuracy. You could only persuade it. This was the rhythm of the workshop, a period of intense action, followed by stillness, a burst of effort, followed by patient waiting. You start to sense how different this is from our modern expectations. Nothing here responds instantly. Precision only reveals itself to those willing to remain present long after their hands have stopped moving. But at sea, the pendulum's authority collapsed entirely. On a ship, nothing stays still. The deck rises and falls with the waves. Gravity itself seems to shift with each roll of the hull. The pendulum no longer swings freely, it stumbles. It hesitates, it lies. This failure wasn't just theoretical, it was catastrophic. Ships drifted miles off course. Voyages extended beyond their expected duration, leading to shortages of food and water. Lives were quietly lost, not in moments of violence, but through simple miscalculation. A clock that was wrong by only a few minutes could mean a ship was miles astray from its intended position. And so, the pendulum found its proper place not everywhere, but somewhere. Back on land, in the stable environments of churches, town halls, and workshops like this one. It remained unmatched for a long time. Its slow, steady rhythm offered a kind of reassurance. It wasn't fast, but it was dignified. It reminded people that time was something steady, something external to themselves, something to be respected. You notice how the pendulum dominates the space around it. Even the smaller clocks in the room seem to acknowledge it, ticking faster but quieter, as though they're aware they can't compete with its commanding presence. The tall case clock does not rush. It doesn't hurry the hour. It simply allows it to arrive. As the light in the workshop shifts, becoming warmer and softer, the pendulum's brass bob seems to glow faintly. It reflects the late afternoon sun in muted tones. Shadows lengthen across the floor. The air cools slightly, and you wonder absent-mindedly if the clock will lose a fraction of a second tonight because of it. Without instruction, your own breathing begins to slow dot in dot out, in time with its swing dot left dot right. The pendulum doesn't care whether you watch it or not. It will continue its work regardless. But by watching, you begin to share its discipline, its refusal to hurry, its quiet acceptance of its own limitations. This is the deeper lesson hidden within its swing. True precision isn't about domination over time, but about cooperation with conditions. Mastery doesn't come from eliminating all the variables, but from understanding them deeply. Soon, our attention will shift again away from these long, graceful arcs and toward the tiny, rapid oscillations of springs wound tight with potential energy. But for now, we remain still, standing beside the pendulum, letting its motion mark the passing of moments without demanding anything in return. The pendulum, with its steady, authoritative swing, recedes into the background. Your focus now shifts, drawn back to the workbench, where time operates on a completely different scale. Here, the grand, visible arc of the clock gives way to something smaller, more intimate, and far more secretive. We're entering the world of watches, where motion is compressed, hidden beneath layers of brass and steel, measured not in sweeping gestures, but in tiny, trembling vibrations. Imagine yourself sitting at this bench. The wooden surface is worn smooth, a testament to years of careful, dedicated labor. It's covered in small marked scratches, dents, the faint ghost of an oil stain, each one a silent story of a repair attempted, perhaps abandoned, and finally, triumphantly, completed. At the center of it all lies a watch movement, no larger than a few coins stacked together. To the naked eye, it seems almost lifeless, inert, but bring a loop, a magnifying lens, to your eye, and suddenly, it reveals its hidden, vibrant life. Within this small, confined circle, the jewel movement waits. Now, these jewels aren't for decoration, not in the way a casual observer might think. They weren't placed there to impress a customer with a fleeting glance inside their new timepiece. In fact, most watch owners will never even see them. Their purpose is purely functional, ruthlessly practical, and entirely unforgiving. They are the unsung heroes of precision. We're talking about rubies, sapphires, sometimes even garnets. These stones aren't chosen for their beauty or color, but for their extreme hardness and incredible smoothness. They are painstakingly cut into tiny, perfect discs, each one pierced with a hole so fine it seems almost impossible to have been made by human hands. Just try to imagine the level of care required to create something so minuscule. A single jewel might measure only a millimeter across. The hole at its center must be perfectly round, perfectly centered. Any flaw, any microscopic imperfection, introduces friction. And in the world of horology, friction is the ultimate enemy. Think about it, metal grinding against metal. Over time, it wears down surfaces, changes their shape, and slows motion. Even the finest, hardest steel pivots will eventually deform under this constant stress. The jewel solves this problem with quiet elegance. The steel pivot of a gear turns within the jewel's smooth, polished embrace, perfectly supported with almost zero resistance. A tiny droplet of oil rests in the jewel's cavity, held there by surface tension, feeding the contact point sparingly and consistently, ensuring the mechanism runs smoothly for years. Now, hold that magnifying glass steady. Feel your arm tense just a little from the effort. In this moment of intense focus, even your own heartbeat seems too loud, too disruptive. The movement continues its delicate, rhythmic dance, completely unaware of your presence. The balance wheel, the heart of the watch, turns back and forth, driven by a hairspring so fine it looks like a single filament of captured breath. Tick-tock-tock-tock, tick-tock-tock. It's a sound far more rapid and urgent than the slow beat of the pendulum. And unlike the pendulum, which demands a calm, stable environment to do its work, the jeweled watch carries its stability within itself. It is, in essence, portable order, a miniature, self-contained universe designed to withstand movement, vibration, and the chaos of the outside world. This is precisely why these watches became symbols of reliability. They traveled in the pockets of explorers. They crossed vast oceans on the wrists of sailors. They accompanied their owners through bustling crowds, violent storms, and long, arduous journeys, all while keeping perfect time. But that incredible reliability is earned right here, at the bench, through a level of patience that borders on reverence. Setting one of these jewels is not a dramatic or heroic act. There's no single moment of glorious triumph. It is a slow, methodical process of alignment. The jewel must be seated perfectly flat and secure within its setting in the brass plate. If it's too tight, it can crack under pressure. Too loose, and it will shift, ruining the perfect alignment and stopping the watch. The pivot must rest precisely at its center, suspended, not touching the walls of the hole, not leaning to one side, simply, perfectly, balanced. Imagine adjusting it. You're holding a tool barely heavier than a feather between your fingers. Your breath slows. The entire room seems to shrink until only the jewel and the pivot exist in your field of vision. Everything else, the sound of the street outside, the other clocks in the workshop, the very passing of the hours fades into an indistinct blur. This is not work that tolerates haste or distraction. It demands complete and total presence. The introduction of jeweled movements represents a philosophical shift as much as a technical one. Instead of fighting friction with brute force and stronger materials, watchmakers chose elegance. They accepted that wear and tear was an inevitable part of any mechanical system, and then they designed a brilliant way to delay it almost indefinitely. They acknowledged the reality of imperfection and engineered a way to work around it. In doing so, they elevated timekeeping, bringing it closer to a form of art. These tiny jewels remain unchanged while the metal world around them ages. They witness years, even decades, of constant motion without complaint. When a vintage watch finally stops ticking, it's rarely the jewel's fault. Almost always, something else has failed. First, a mainspring has broken, or oil has dried up. The jewel, the silent guardian, endures. As dusk begins to fall, the light in the workshop grows softer, warmer. The flame of a single candle or an old oil lamp takes over, casting long, dancing shadows and warm reflections across the brass plates of the movement. For a fleeting moment, the jewels catch the light, flashing a brilliant red or a deep violet before disappearing again beneath the bridges and gears that cover them. You lean back slightly, letting your eyes rest for a moment. But the sound continues, that steady, reassuring ticking. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply is. This is the profound comfort of well-made things. They work quietly. In the background, they don't announce their complexity or boast about their precision. They just perform their task, again and again and again, asking only for a little respect and care. Soon, your thoughts will drift further away from the intricate interior of this watch, and out toward the larger world beyond the workshop walls. The city waits, restless and loud by comparison. But for now, you remain here, in this quiet pocket of stillness, listening to a beautiful, tiny machine that turns jewels, steel, and immense patience into the very fabric of time itself. The jeweled movement rests once more beneath its bridge, protected, complete for now. My attention shifts to a different task, one that feels older, heavier, and more deliberate. At the edge of the workbench lies a small brass wheel, unfinished, its circular form broken by a series of rough, uneven teeth. This is not a component that arrived ready-made. This one must be shaped by hand. I pick it up, and its weight is reassuring, solid, honest. Brass carries a certain warmth even in a cool room, and it responds to the touch with a soft, yielding resistance. The gear is clamped carefully into a small vise, positioned so that one tooth faces upward, waiting. The file in my hand is narrow and worn smooth along its handle. Generations of fingers may have shaped it this way, or perhaps just years of my own repetition. Its surface is fine, almost gentle, but its purpose is exacting. Each stroke removes material. Each stroke is irreversible. I draw the file across the tooth, slowly. There's a faint sound more felt than heard, a soft rasp as metal yields. The scent of brass dust, subtle but unmistakable, joins the familiar smells of oil and wood that permeate the workshop. The gear doesn't hurry me. It offers no guidance beyond its own shape. This is work governed by feel, more than by sight. I pause often, lifting the magnifying glass to inspect the angle. The tooth must match its neighbors exactly. Too shallow, and it will slip. Too steep, and it will bind. The difference is measured in fractions so small they almost resist language. Around me, the workshop continues its quiet conversation. Clocks tick with their individual voices. A pendulum swings somewhere behind me, a steady, hypnotic beat. Outside, the city of London moves, but its sounds arrive softened, filtered through stone and glass, becoming a distant hum that only highlights the silence within these walls. I return to the file. Stroke after stroke, the tooth becomes smoother, more defined. It begins to resemble the others. Though I know better than to trust appearances alone, only when it meets its partner real will its true quality be revealed. You see, gear teeth are never alone. They exist to touch, to push, to yield. Their success is measured not in isolation, but in cooperation in a delicate, continuous dance. I often imagine the clockmakers who came before me, performing the same task by candlelight, long before standardized parts were common. For them, every wheel was unique, every tooth was shaped with pure intention. But repair meant recreating a lost component entirely from scratch, guided only by deep experience and an ocean of patience. This, I think, is why workshops like this one feel so timeless. The tools change very little. The methods remain fundamentally familiar. True precision doesn't demand novelty, it demands consistency. A disciplined hand, and a focused mind. My own hand begins to move almost without conscious instruction. File, pause, inspect, file again. The rhythm settles into my body, a comfortable and familiar cadence. My breathing aligns with the movement, slow and regular. In moments like this, time ceases to feel abstract. I'm not just measuring it, I'm shaping it physically, one tooth at a time, giving form to the very thing that will later measure its passing. It's a meditative process. The rest of the world fades away, and there is only the file, the brass, and the task at hand. There is no room for distraction, no space for a wandering mind. The slightest lapse in concentration could ruin hours of work, rendering the entire gear useless. This is the discipline of the craft, a demand for total presence. Each movement is a commitment, a small promise made to the final mechanism. You learn to trust your hands, to read the feedback from the metal, to feel when the angle is right without needing to constantly measure. The surface of the tooth starts to shine under the lamplight, losing its rough cut texture and taking on a smooth, engineered finish. I run my fingertip over it, feeling for any burrs or imperfections. It's a tactile language, one that communicates more than sight ever could. The goal is not just a shape, but the feeling of a surface that will mesh perfectly with another, with minimal friction and maximum efficiency. It's a conversation between two pieces of metal that will last for decades, or even centuries. Eventually, the final stroke is made. I hold my breath for a moment, then release the gear from the vise. I turn it gently between my fingers, checking for symmetry, for balance. It is not perfect, nothing ever is, and the pursuit of absolute perfection is a fool's errand. But it is balanced. It is consistent. It will do its job. When it is paired with its partner wheel, its tiny, imperceptible imperfections will soften, absorbed into the harmony of the entire system. This is the quiet genius of mechanical timekeeping. No single part must be flawless. Instead, the beauty lies in how each component compensates for the others, creating a whole that is far more reliable than any individual piece. It's a system of mutual support, of give and take. I place the newly finished gear aside, ready for the next stage of assembly. The bench feels orderly again. The tools return to their designated places. A silent army at rest. The file, its work now complete, is laid down gently. Soon, I will face a different challenge: the immense, stored power of the mainspring, coiled tightly like a serpent, waiting to be controlled and tamed. But for now, in this moment, I allow myself a brief pause, a moment of stillness. All around me, the clocks continue their steady ticking, marking progress without urgency, each one a testament to this very process. The newly shaped gear now rests quietly among other finished parts. But our work is far from complete. At the center of every watch, hidden beneath plates and bridges, lies a force far more powerful than its size suggests. This is the mainspring. It does not tick. It does not mark seconds. It waits, coiled tightly, storing effort, restraint, and potential. We reach for it carefully. At first glance, the mainspring appears unremarkable, a thin ribbon of steel, darkened slightly by age and oil. Uncoiled, it stretches longer than you might expect, flexible yet stubborn, eager to twist back into itself. Its strength is deceptive. In the hand, it feels light, almost fragile, but mishandled, it can snap free with sudden violence, cutting skin or flying loose across the room. Every clockmaker learns to respect it early on. Imagine holding it between your fingers, feeling the coolness of the metal, aware that this narrow strip is the sole source of motion for the entire watch. All the elegance of jeweled pivots, polished gears, and balanced escapements depends entirely on how the spring is wound, seated, and controlled. The mainspring isn't about precision in the visible sense. It's about restraint. We begin the slow process of guiding it into its barrel. This is not done quickly. The spring resists, pushing outward, seeking freedom. Our hands respond with calm pressure, easing it inward, turn by turn. Each movement is deliberate. A moment of impatience here would undo everything. As the spring coils, tension builds quietly. Nothing moves yet. No ticking begins. The energy remains silent, compressed, waiting for release. This waiting is essential. Too much tension, and the force will overwhelm the delicate gear train. Too little, and the watch will falter, losing strength long before the day is done. We pause often, allowing our fingers to relax, checking the alignment. The spring must lie evenly within the barrel, its coils neither overlapping nor scraping the walls. Any friction here would steal power before it ever reaches the escapement. This balance between strength and gentleness is at the very heart of watchmaking. In earlier centuries, mainsprings were unpredictable things. Steel varied in quality. Springs weakened unevenly. A watch might run strongly in the morning and fade by the afternoon. This inconsistency haunted clockmakers for generations. They responded not with speed, but with refinement, better steel, improved tempering, careful shaping. Still, no spring was ever perfect. You can't help but think of how the mainspring mirrors human effort. Wound tightly, it strains and breaks. Left to loose, it accomplishes little. Only when tension is moderated applied, but not abused, does it serve its purpose fully. When the spring is finally seated and the barrel is closed, the energy is sealed away from the outside. Nothing appears different. The watch looks unchanged, but within, the future motion of ours has been prepared. We set the barrel aside and wipe our hands gently on a cloth. The smell of oil lingers. The workshop feels warmer now, though the stone walls remain cool. Somewhere nearby, a clock strikes softly, its sound muffled, respectful of the work being done. This is the quiet triumph of the mainspring. It performs its role without ever being seen. It does not mark time directly, Yet without it, time would not move at all. Soon, this stored energy will be allowed to flow regulated, divided, and disciplined by gears and escapements. The first beat of a newly assembled watch will follow, modest but satisfying. For now, we remain still, aware of the unseen force resting in the barrel, waiting patiently for permission to move. The mainspring rests sealed within its barrel, its quiet strength contained and disciplined. For a moment, you step away from force and tension and turn instead towards surface, light, and appearance. On a folded cloth near the edge of the bench lies an enameled dial, thin, pale, and deceptively fragile. Compared to steel and brass, it feels almost like porcelain memory, something that must be handled as much with restraint as with skill. You lift it carefully. The dial is cool to the touch, its surface smooth, but not perfectly flat. Enamel holds tiny irregularities. Subtle ripples form during firing, invisible at a glance yet always present. These imperfections are not flaws. They are signatures of the process. Reminders that this object passed through flame before it ever reached your hands. The numerals black, delicately painted circle the center with quiet confidence. Roman numerals, their shapes familiar to anyone who has glanced at a clock face without thinking. Yet here, up close, they demand attention. Each stroke was placed by hand. Each curve was once liquid pigment, fixed permanently by heat. You place the dial down again and prepare your materials. Fine polishing powders, soft cloths, a shallow dish of water, nothing abrasive enough to damage. The enamel only enough to coax its surface toward clarity. This is not shaping. This is refinement. The motion begins slowly, circular, light. The cloth glides across the dial's surface, carrying with it a faint, chalky whisper. There is no resistance, only contact. You must trust your pressure, because the enamel will not forgive excess. One careless moment could leave a scratch that cannot be undone. As you work, the dial begins to change almost imperceptibly. It does not grow brighter all at once. Instead, it deepens. The white becomes more luminous, more reflective, catching the ambient light of the workshop and holding it softly. The numerals seem to sharpen, not because they have changed, but because the surface around them has grown calmer. This task requires a different kind of patience than filing gears or seating springs. There is no progress you can measure mechanically, no alignment to check, only feel and observation. You tilt the dial slightly, watching how light moves across it. Where it scatters unevenly, you return. Where it flows smoothly, you leave it be. Enamel dials carry a particular weight in the history of timekeeping. Earlier watches relied on engraved metal faces, often difficult to read in low light. Enamel brought clarity, contrast, accessibility. It made time legible to more people, not just those trained to interpret shadows on brass. But enamel was temperamental. Firing could crack it, cooling could warp it. Many dials were lost before ever being fitted to a watch. Those that survived were valued not just for their appearance, but for their endurance. You imagine the kiln where this dial was born, the heat, the waiting, the uncertainty, and now, years later, it rests in your hands, its journey nearly complete. As evening advances, the light in the workshop shifts again. The dial responds immediately, reflecting the warmer tones of the setting sun. It seems almost alive, adapting, responding. You slow your movements further, aware that the stage of work invites contemplation as much as technique. Polishing an enamel dial is not about perfection, absolute. Uniformity would feel cold, lifeless. Instead, the goal is harmony between light and surface, between clarity and softness. A face that can be read easily, but never aggressively. A face that belongs to time, not to display. When you finally set the dial aside, you do so with a sense of quiet completion. It does not announce its readiness. It simply rests, prepared to be paired with the movement beneath it, to translate invisible motion into visible passage. Soon, the watch will begin to feel whole. The inner mechanics and outer expression will meet, and time will become something you can glance at, rather than listen to. But before that, there remains one of the most delicate tasks of all, the assembly of the escapement, where energy becomes rhythm. For now, you clean your hands, extinguish the polishing lamp, and let the ticking of the surrounding clocks fill the pause. The enamel dial rests quietly to one side, its surface calm and reflective, while your attention turns inward again back to the hidden heart of the watch. This is the moment where stored energy, careful filing, jewel bearings, and measured restraint converge. Before you lies the escapement, a mechanism so small and so precise that it often feels less assembled than negotiated into existence. You arrange the parts deliberately on a small tray, the escape wheel with its sharply defined teeth, the pallet fork slender and poised, the balance wheel waiting with restrained potential, and the hairspring coiled like a breath held too long. Each component is insignificant on its own. Together, they will decide whether time flows evenly or stumbles. The escapement doesn't create energy, it controls it. You begin with the escape wheel, setting it gently into place between its jewel pivots. The wheel doesn't spin freely, nor should it. It waits, held in check by the pallet fork, which you guide into position next. This fork is incredibly delicate. Its tip's faced with jewels designed to meet the teeth of the wheel with minimal friction. This contact between jewel and steel is where motion becomes rhythm. You adjust the depth carefully to deep, and the teeth will bind, wasting energy, to shallow, and they will slip, losing control. There is no visible marker to guide you, only experience, only feel. You move the fork by mere fractions, then stop, watching how it responds. The workshop feels unusually still during this process. Even the surrounding clocks seem to recede into the background. Their ticking soften, as though aware that something more fragile is underway. You find yourself breathing more shallowly, your body instinctively adjusting to the delicacy of the task. When the balance wheel is finally introduced, the transformation is immediate, though understated. A gentle nudge sets it oscillating. The hairspring expands and contracts, guiding the motion with quiet authority. The pallet fork answers. The escape wheel advances one, tooth at a time. Tick, pause, tick. Not a rush, not a flow. It's a release measured in moments. This is the genius of the escapement. It takes the raw, brute force of the mainspring and teaches it patience. Without this mechanism, the watch would race uncontrollably until its energy was spent in a matter of minutes. With it, that same energy is rationed carefully, second by second, hour by hour. You lean in and listen closely. The sound is faint, but distinct. A living rhythm emerges. Neither hurried nor hesitant, each tick carries intention, each pause carries restraint. Escapements have evolved over centuries, with each new design reflecting a philosophy of control. The early verge escapements were sturdy, but inefficient. Anchor escapements improved reliability for large clocks, and the lever escapement, now before you, represents a remarkable refinement. It's compact, efficient, and perfectly suited for portable timepieces. Yet no matter how advanced the design, it never removes the need for human judgment. Assembly remains an art. You test the balance wheel, gently, watching how quickly it returns to motion. You observe the amplitude of its swing, the evenness of its beat. Subtle irregularities reveal themselves only to those trained to notice them. A slight hesitation, a faint asymmetry. You make a tiny adjustment and wait, observing the effect. Time passes quietly in the workshop as you observe time being born. There is a certain humility required here. You cannot force the escapement to behave. You can only encourage it. You adjust, observe, and allow it to reveal its unique character as darkness deepens outside. The light from the oil lamp in the workshop grows warmer, more confined. Shadows sharpen around your tools. The escapement glints briefly as it moves, catching the lamplight in fleeting flashes. Finally, the rhythm stabilizes. The ticking becomes consistent, almost comforting. The movement has found its voice. You lean back slightly, allowing your shoulders to relax for the first time in what feels like hours. The most sensitive work is now complete. The watch is alive now, not merely assembled. Soon, it will be cased, wound, set. It will be carried out into the world to measure the moments of a life. But for now, it remains here, under your care, marking time in a quiet corner of an 18th century workshop. The night advances. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels passing over stone is distant and uneven. Inside, the escapement continues its measured conversation with gravity and spring. The escapement has finally found its balance, and with it, the watch reaches a quiet, expectant threshold. There is a profound yet subtle difference between a mechanism that can simply move and one that has truly begun to move with purpose. This difference doesn't reveal itself in some grand spectacle, but in the quietest of sounds. The very first true beat of a newly assembled watch is never loud. It's modest, almost shy, as if it's uncertain whether it's even allowed to exist yet. You hold the watch gently in your palm, feeling its faint, nascent vibration through the cool metal of the case. The motion is entirely internal, hidden from view, yet it's completely unmistakable. Tick, tick, tick. The sound is even, restrained, and deliberate. It doesn't rush to announce its arrival. Instead, it settles into a pace that feels utterly inevitable, as though it has always been ticking and you are only now, in this moment, becoming aware of it. This moment carries a peculiar stillness with it. The workbench is quiet. The tools are laid out in perfect order, their work for now complete. The air in the workshop seems to pause around you, holding its breath. You don't move immediately. Experience has taught you that the watch, this new creation, needs time to reveal its true character. A hurried judgment, a quick assessment, would miss the essential subtleties that define its quality. So, you listen. The beat must be even, not just steady, but perfectly balanced. Each tick should be a mirror of the last, neither longer nor shorter, neither heavier nor lighter. This symmetry isn't just for aesthetic appeal, it's fundamentally functional. An uneven beat is a sign of inefficiency. It wastes precious energy. It introduces drift, a microscopic error that, over hours and days, will accumulate until the smallest imbalance becomes a noticeable flaw. At first, you adjust nothing at all. You simply let the watch run. You allow it to settle into its own rhythm, to warm slightly from the friction of its own motion, to distribute the fine oils through its intricate channels and jewel bearings. Many tiny imperfections, small inconsistencies from the assembly process, will correct themselves with time. Others, the more stubborn ones, become clearer only when patience allows them to surface. This waiting, this period of observation, is an essential part of the craft. As the first few minutes pass, you bring the watch closer to your ear. The sound deepens slightly, becoming more confident, more assured. The oscillation of the balance wheel, the very heart of the movement, stabilizes into a consistent arc. The hairspring, the delicate coil of metal, breathes in a perfectly regular pattern, expanding and contracting with a calm, metronomic precision that seems to resist any disturbance from the outside world. You can't help but think of how this moment connects you to generations of watchmakers. Every single one, regardless of their era or their workshop, knows this pause, this act of listening, the quiet, profound satisfaction of hearing time begin. Born from their own hands, it's a shared heritage, a silent understanding passed down through the centuries. Outside the workshop, the city of London continues its restless, ceaseless movement. Cars pass, people talk, life flows on. Somewhere nearby, a great church bell prepares to strike the hour, its deep tone ready to resonate across the rooftops. In stark contrast, this watch speaks softly, marking time for an individual rather than for a crowd. It's designed to be a private companion, to be held close, consulted quietly, and trusted implicitly. Now, after this patient wait, you make a small adjustment of movement so slight it's barely perceptible. A fraction of a turn on the regulator index. A shift so tiny it would be completely meaningless in almost any other context. But here, inside this miniature mechanical universe, it matters immensely. You listen again. The beat responds. It's not a dramatic change, just enough. The rhythm shifts, becoming ever so slightly more perfect. This is how true precision is achieved, not through bold, sweeping gestures, but through an accumulation of care. Each small adjustment refines the whole. Each pause, each moment of listening, allows your understanding of this specific movement to deepen. It's a conversation between maker and machine, a dialogue spoken in ticks and vibrations. As the watch continues to run, its voice now strong and steady, you place it carefully on the padded surface of the bench and step back slightly. You observe it from a small distance, letting it exist without your direct interference. Its rhythmic ticking starts to blend with the other sounds in the room, becoming part of the workshop's ambient, gentle rhythm. The old clocks on the walls seem to answer it, their own beats offering a slower, more ponderous affirmation. The long pendulum in the grandfather clock swings in its stately arc, a slower counterpoint to the watch's rapid pulse. Together, they create a layered conversation, time speaking to itself in multiple registers and different voices. This is the moment when the watch begins to cease belonging solely to you, the maker. Its purpose starts to extend outward, beyond the confines of this bench, this room. Soon, it will leave the workshop. It will be carried in a pocket, strapped to a wrist, consulted in moments of decision, or glanced at in moments of idle thought. It will be relied upon, day in and day out, often without a second thought to the complexity within. But here, now, it remains under your quiet guardianship. It's a final, fleeting moment of intimacy before it begins its new life. You listen for a while longer, not because you must for any technical reason, but because the sound itself invites it. It's a mesmerizing, satisfying sound, the sound of order, of precision, of potential. The first beat has long since passed. The second followed, and then another, and a continuous, unbroken chain. Time continues, as it always has and always will, measured now by this beautiful, intricate object that your own hands have shaped from raw material into a living, breathing machine. The watch on the bench keeps ticking, a steady, measured beat. But as you listen, your mind starts to drift beyond these workshop walls. That rhythm carries you out into a much wider, more uncertain world. The problem that obsessed 18th century clockmakers wasn't born in quiet rooms like this one. It was born at sea, where the horizon offers no landmarks and every league traveled is shrouded in guesswork. This was the longitude problem, a ghost on the map, a missing coordinate that turned the vast oceans into fields of deadly uncertainty for centuries. Sailors could figure out their latitude, their north-south position, with relative ease. The sun's path across the sky was predictable. The stars held their familiar angles. But longitude, the east-west coordinate, was a stubborn mystery. Without a clock that could keep perfect time on a rolling ship, there was no reliable way to know how far you'd sail from home. Maps were just approximations. Voyages stretched on for weeks, sometimes months, longer than planned. Ships would arrive late, if they arrived at all. Countless lives were lost to this quiet uncertainty. It wasn't always a dramatic shipwreck or a sudden storm. More often, it was a slow accumulation of small errors, a reef miscalculated by a few miles, a coastline mistaken for another. Food and water rations stretched thinner and thinner until they ran out. The sea didn't punish sailors with a loud roar. It simply let their small misjudgments compound, day after day, until the final, fatal consequence. Into this monumental challenge stepped John Harrison. He wasn't a gentleman of science or a university-trained mathematician. He was a carpenter's son from the English countryside, armed with little more than an uncommon patience and a deep understanding of how things work. He saw the longitude problem not as an abstract puzzle of astronomy and numbers, but as a practical challenge of wood, brass, motion, and balance. While the great minds of the age looked to the stars, Harrison looked to his workbench. Imagine him in his workshop, decades before this watch was even conceived. He's surrounded by a graveyard of quiet failures. Clocks that lose a few seconds each day. Wooden gears that warp in the humidity. Metal springs that slowly lose their tension. Each failure was a lesson, but none offered a quick solution. Harrison didn't rush. He didn't publish papers or seek fame. He just worked, methodically, patiently, for years. His central idea was deceptively simple. If a clock could keep perfect time on a ship the time of a known location, like London, then longitude would solve itself. A sailor could compare the local time, determined by the sun at its highest point, to the time on the clock. The difference between those two times would reveal, through simple math, how far east or west the ship had traveled. The idea was simple, but making it a reality was extraordinarily difficult. A clock at sea has to survive a constant battle. It must resist the violent pitching and rolling of the ship. It must withstand wild swings in temperature and humidity that make metal expand and contract. It must endure the slow, grinding fatigue of its own moving parts. Harrison understood that he couldn't eliminate these chaotic forces. Instead, he had to find a way to balance them. He brilliantly designed mechanisms that would compensate for their own errors. He abandoned the traditional pendulum, which was useless on a moving vessel. He developed new kinds of balance wheels that could oscillate smoothly regardless of motion. He created ingenious devices using different metals, so that as one part expanded with heat, another would expand in the opposite direction, canceling out the error. His clocks became incredibly complex, not for show, but for sheer survival. They were intricate ecosystems of gears and springs, each part working in harmony to defy the chaos of the ocean. Years turned into decades. Harrison built one magnificent timekeeper after another. H1, H2, H3, each one a masterpiece of engineering, and each an improvement on the last. He submitted his creations to the Board of Longitude, the government body offering a massive prize for a solution. But the board was full of astronomers who were skeptical of a mechanical answer. They measured his progress with impatience, not insight, and the prize money remained just out of reach, tangled in bureaucracy and academic pride. Still, Harrison's clocks ran, and as you listen to the steady ticking of the watch here on this bench, you can almost feel his philosophy echoing through time. True precision isn't dramatic, it's persistent. It doesn't shout for attention. It quietly earns your trust, second by second, day after day. Harrison's final sea clock, the H4, was his triumph. It was a beautiful, oversized watch, small enough to hold in your hand. It proved what so many had believed impossible. On a grueling transatlantic voyage, it kept time with astonishing accuracy, losing only a few seconds over many weeks. Longitude, the phantom that had haunted sailors for centuries, had finally been captured, not by a grand theory, but by stubborn, brilliant craftsmanship, refined through a lifetime of endurance. Yet even then, the story doesn't end with a sudden, heroic victory. Recognition came slowly. The establishment was reluctant to admit that a humble carpenter had solved the world's greatest scientific puzzle. His validation was delayed, the full prize money paid out only in his final years. Harrison's legacy isn't one of instant fame, but of gradual, hard-won acknowledgement. A success earned through quiet perfection, not loud proclamation. And maybe that's why his spirit feels so at home in a workshop like this. His clocks were never meant to dazzle you at a glance. They were built to endure, to keep time faithfully while the unseen forces of the world did their best to throw them off. As the watch on your bench continues its steady beat, you can feel the weight of that long struggle. Each tick and tock is a testament to discipline, a memory of a quiet obsession that changed the world. For a moment, John Harrison's presence lingers in the air, resolute, determined, and finally, at peace. Soon, our journey will move on, exploring how entire cultures came to live by the rhythm of the clock. But for now, we honor the quiet genius who first tamed time itself. John Harrison's presence fades from our story now, not as an ending, but as a quiet retreat. His solution to the longitude problem didn't erase the pendulum from history. It just put its limitations into sharper focus. And so, our thoughts return to that familiar, patient device the pendulum manned, to the very problem that both elevated it and confined it. The pendulum's beauty is its simplicity. A weight, a rod, a pivot point, gravity does the rest. In theory, its swing is eternal, repeating the same arc with dependable regularity. This regularity once felt like a promise that time itself could be made obedient, predictable, and universally shared. For a while, it seemed the promise had been kept. In the calm of quiet rooms, pendulum clocks achieved astonishing accuracy in observatories. They regulated experiments and celestial observations. In cities, they synchronized bells, workdays, and daily rituals. Their slow, deliberate motion reassured people that time wasn't just slipping away unnoticed, but was being carefully accounted for, second by second. Yet, beneath this confidence lay a fragile truth. A pendulum's perfection exists only in isolation. The moment is exposed to motion. Its certainty begins to unravel, even here in London. Far from the rolling deck of a ship, a pendulum is never truly at rest. Floors flex underfoot, walls cool and warm with the passing day. The air thickens with humidity, then thins again. Each tiny change alters the swing, not dramatically, but persistently. You can almost imagine a clockmaker observing this not as a failure, but as an inevitability. A pendulum doesn't resist the world, it responds to it. Temperature, in particular, becomes a quiet adversary. As the metal rod warms, it lengthens, just slightly. The pendulum slows as it cools. It contracts. The pendulum quickens. The clock neither knows nor cares why its pace changes. It simply follows the laws of physics, completely indifferent to human expectations. To counter this, clockmakers devise ingenious solutions. They built rods from alternating metals that expanded and contracted in opposite ways, canceling each other out. They created mercury-filled bobs that rose and fell with the heat, keeping the center of gravity constant. Each innovation was a quest for balance. Not absolute control, but no solution eliminated variability entirely. They merely reduced it, narrowing the margin of error, chasing an ever-receding horizon of perfection. This narrowing mattered on land. It mattered a great deal, but at sea, it was nowhere near enough. On a ship, the pendulum loses its authority altogether. The deck tilts, the horizon shifts, gravity itself feels inconsistent, pulling from different angles. The pendulum no longer swings freely, it lurches. It hesitates. It lies. The very motion meant to measure time becomes corrupted by the motion of the vessel carrying it. This realization reshaped the entire philosophy of timekeeping. It forced clockmakers to confront an uncomfortable truth. No single solution works everywhere. Precision depends on context. The pendulum wasn't discarded, but it was reassigned. It remained in towers and halls, in places where stillness could be preserved long enough for its accuracy to matter. It governed public time, the communal rhythm of a city. Meanwhile, watches and spring-driven clocks took over where portability and resilience were required. Together, they formed a layered system of timekeeping, each device performing best within its natural environment, its own specific niche. As you reflect on this division, this workshop feels like a meeting place between these two philosophies. The tall clocks stand quietly against the wall, their long pendulums continuing their measured, graceful arcs. The watches on the bench beside you vibrate rapidly, their tiny balance wheels indifferent to the room's subtle shifts, to solutions, to different understandings of time. Neither is superior to the other, each is simply appropriate for its task. This acceptance of limitation, of specialization, marks a real turning point in horological thought. It signals a kind of maturity. Timekeeping becomes less about finding a single, perfect mechanism, and more about matching the right tools to the right conditions. You notice how this mirrors human effort more broadly. Some tasks demand stillness, focus, and a controlled environment. Others require adaptability, resilience, and the ability to perform under pressure. Expecting one approach to serve all purposes leads only to frustration. The pendulum continues its swing. Regardless of these reflections, it doesn't defend itself. It doesn't justify its failures at sea. It simply performs as it was designed to, here in this quiet room. And perhaps that is its final lesson. True reliability isn't universal perfection, but consistency within known bounds. As the hour deepens, the workshop grows quieter still. The clocks remain awake, attentive, marking progress without urgency. Your thoughts begin to drift once more, moving away from the mechanisms. As the day's lesson from the pendulum settles into quiet understanding, evening completes its slow arrival. The last traces of daylight withdraw from the workshop windows, leaving a softened darkness that gathers gradually in corners, beneath benches, behind tall cases. This is the hour when the work changes character. Precision remains, but visibility no longer comes freely. You reach for the bullseye lantern. It's heavier than it looks. Its metal casing cool. Its glass thick and slightly imperfect. At the center sits a convex lens, designed not to scatter light, but to focus it, drawing the flames glow into a directed beam. When lit, it doesn't flood the room. It selects. It chooses where attention may rest. You strike the flame carefully. The wick catches, hesitates, then steadies. A warm circle of light forms, contained and deliberate. Shadows sharpen immediately, retreating where the beam points, deepening everywhere else. The workshop is transformed, not erased, but narrowed. This is how work continues after sunset. You position the lantern close to the bench, angling it so the light falls exactly where needed. The dial, the movement, the ledger all emerge selectively, while the rest of the room dissolves into obscurity. The world becomes smaller, quieter, more intimate. Reading by lantern light is not reading as it is known today. It is slower. The eyes tire more quickly. Letters blur if concentration slips. You must hold the page at just the right angle, adjust the lantern slightly, return again. Each movement is conscious. You open a notebook. Its pages thick and slightly rough. Ink has soaked into the fibers unevenly over time, leaving lines that vary in darkness. You trace them carefully, reading notes made earlier, observations of rate, temperature, adjustment. Numbers sit beside brief remarks. Runs fast and warm, settles after 1 hour. Beat even. These records aren't meant to impress. They are meant to remember. Lantern light lends them a particular gravity. The flame flickers subtly, causing shadows to move across the page. Letters seem to breathe. Time itself feels less rigid, more fluid, as though acknowledging the limits of human perception. You glance back to the watch, checking its motion under the focus beam. Jewels glint briefly, then disappear again. The balance wheel continues its oscillation, unconcerned with the hour. The lantern's warmth reaches it faintly, and you wonder, briefly, whether the added heat will alter its rate by the smallest margin. Probably, but not enough to matter tonight. This is another quiet compromise the craft accepts. Absolute control is impossible. Awareness is enough. Bullseye lanterns were common tools in workshops. Like this, valued for their efficiency, oil was precious. Light was managed carefully. A wide, flame wasted fuel and attention. Focused light allowed work to continue without excess. There is something instructive in this economy. The lantern teaches selectivity. You cannot see everything at once. You choose what matters. Illuminate it and allow the rest to remain unseen. As the night deepens, sounds outside diminish. Carriage wheels become less frequent. Voices fade. Inside, the ticking of clocks grows more pronounced, filling the silence with layered rhythm. The lantern's flame joins this quiet orchestra, crackling softly, alive but restrained. You read a little longer. You make a final note. You close the ledger gently, as though not to disturb the stillness that has settled. Soon, the lantern will be dim. The workshop will rest. But for now, you remain here, surrounded by partial light and patient mechanisms, aware that knowledge, like illumination, often arrives in focus beams rather than floods. As the lantern's flame dips low, casting a softer light across the workshop, a familiar thought begins to form in the quiet. It's not some grand revelation, but a persistent truth that returns in these late hours when the day as work has settled and the chorus of ticking clock seems to speak more clearly than words. This craft, this art of clockmaking, has never been just about accuracy. It's about beauty, a beauty that is measured, deliberate, and restrained. Here, in this room filled with tools and ticking cases, art and time aren't separate ideas. They're partners, bound together. A watch doesn't need fancy decoration to function. A clock doesn't require intricate engraving to mark the hour. Yet, almost every single piece that comes through this workshop carries some human touch, some embellishment that goes beyond pure mechanics. It might be a subtle flourish on a dial, a delicate pattern cut into a balance cock, or a carefully chosen typeface for the numerals. These details don't make the mechanism any more precise, but they're never seen as unnecessary. In fact, they're expected. It's as if time itself must be dressed for the occasion. I run a finger along the edge of a brass plate, feeling the smooth, beveled finish. This polishing, this softening, takes time that could have been spent chasing another fraction of a second of accuracy or finishing another piece to sell. But customers notice these things, and more importantly, I notice them. The smoothness of a surface, the harmony of its proportions, the quiet satisfaction of perfect symmetry. It all matters, even if it can't be measured in seconds gained or lost. In 18th century London, we clockmakers live in a state of creative tension. We are engineers, but we are also artists. Our work must perform flawlessly, yet it must also please the eye. A watch carried in a gentleman's pocket isn't just a tool, it's a statement. It's revealed, opened, and admired. It becomes a quiet part of a person's public identity. The first thing most people notice is the dial. It's often a piece of white enamel, carefully fired to a smooth, almost fragile perfection. The black numerals are laid out with mathematical precision, sharp and clear. Roman numerals still hold sway, a nod to tradition, though Arabic numbers are gaining ground on more practical watches. Every choice has its own meaning. This one speaks of heritage, that one whispers of modernity. Even the space between the numbers is a delicate dance between clarity and grace. Then, there are the hands, slender and elegant, often made of blued steel. If they're too thick, they hide the dial. Too thin, and they vanish in dim light. Their tips might taper gently or feature decorative cutouts, reducing weight while adding a touch of elegance. When they move, they do so with a silent, ceremonial grace, marking time without demanding all of your attention. But the artistry doesn't stop there. Inside the case, in places few owners will ever see, it persists, engraving curls across metal plates, visible only to me, the maker, and perhaps another clockmaker decades from now. Some patterns are traditional leaves, scrolls, geometric borders passed down through generations of masters and apprentices. Others are like subtle signatures, small variations that quietly declare who made this piece. I know where to find them, even if most people never will. This hidden beauty serves no customer directly. It's a tribute to the craft itself, a nod to the philosophy of our work. To measure time is to confront its relentless, irreversible passing. Beauty softens the confrontation. It makes the constant march of seconds feel a little more human, a little more bearable. I pause beside a long case clock, its tall wooden body standing like a silent guardian in the corner. The case itself was made by a master cabinet maker. It's wood chosen with care. Its grain aligned with purpose. Perhaps it's walnut, or maybe oak. The surface has been polished to a warm glow that reflects the lantern light. This too is part of the clock's identity, even if my own hands didn't shape the wood. And when this clock strikes the hour, the sound must match its appearance. A refined case demands a refined tone. The bells are chosen by ear, tuned through experience, not with scientific instruments. A strike that's too sharp is startling. One that's too dull feels disappointing. The perfect sound settles into the room and then fades away gently, leaving behind a sense of peaceful completion. I often think about the people who will own these objects. The merchants, the lawyers, the sea captains, the aristocrats. Each of them will read the time in their own way. Some will live by it strictly, their day is governed by its rhythm. Others will just glance at it occasionally, finding comfort in its steady presence. The artistry is what allows the clock to be more than just a machine. It becomes part of the atmosphere of a home. Of course, there is also the competition. London is teeming with skilled makers, each one quietly trying to outdo the others. Innovation is admired, but gaudy excess is frowned upon. A clock that shouts for attention is seen as vulgar. The highest praise is always understated, well made, good taste, reliable. Returning to my bench, I'm reminded of how fragile this balance is, the one between precision and beauty. If you lean too far towards art, accuracy can suffer. But if you focus only on function, the work loses its soul. The greatest clockmakers are the ones who make this balancing act seem effortless. Even though it is anything but, the lantern's light catches a polished edge, revealing its perfection for just a moment before the shadow returns. In that instant, it almost feels as if time itself has paused. It hasn't, of course. The ticking continues. The balance wheels swing. The seconds pass, one after another. But within that rhythm, there is room for grace. And that is the quiet truth of this trade. We don't just measure time. We give it a form that people can live with, look at, and trust. We turn an abstract concept into a physical object, transforming mechanical movement into something with meaning. In doing so, we make time not just countable, but bearable. As the workshop breathes around me, filled with a soft chorus of measured motion, I understand that this marriage of art and time isn't just decoration. When you finally step away from the bench, the workshop does not fall silent. It never truly does. The clocks continue their steady labor, indifferent to your movement. Their ticking following you as you lift the latch and open the door to the street. Outside, London breathes differently. The air is cooler, heavier, layered with smoke, damp stone, and the distant presence of many lives unfolding at once. The transition is gentle, but unmistakable, like stepping from a controlled rhythm into a looser, more unpredictable tempo. The cobblestones beneath your boots are uneven, worn smooth by generations of footsteps and carriage wheels. Each stone carries the memory of weight and repetition, much like the gears you shape by hand. The street does not move with the precision of your clocks. It flows instead in pulses, brief rushes of noise followed by lulls, voices rising and fading, wheels rattling past and then disappearing into the distance. Carriages pass slowly, their occupants largely unseen behind glass and heavy curtains. You know who they are without needing to look closely. These are the clients who commission the finest pieces, the ones who speak of time as something to be managed rather than endured. For them, a clock is not only a necessity, but a statement. Its presence in their home confirms order, wealth, and a certain mastery over daily life. Inside those homes, time behaves differently. Meals arrive when expected. Appointments are kept with polite punctuality. Servants adjust clocks regularly, ensuring they remain aligned with the accepted standard of the day. A clock that runs fast or slow is noticed quickly, corrected without ceremony. Time, there is something smooth, domesticated, and quietly enforced. You walk past a townhouse where warm light spills from tall windows through the glass. You glimpse polished furniture, paintings arranged with intent, and a long case clock standing proudly against a paneled wall. Its case gleams, its dial clean and legible even from the street. It strikes the hour, and the sound is absorbed gently by carpets and curtains, softened until it becomes part of the room's texture. That same are sounds very different where you stand. Here, the bell's echo collides with street noise, footsteps, laughter, distant shouts, the scrape of iron on stone. The time is the same, yet the experience of it is not. You feel this contrast deeply, though you rarely speak of it. Your work bridges these worlds without belonging fully to either. Further along, a group of apprentices hurry past, their voices low, their pace quick. They live by different clocks altogether. Their days are measured not in hours, but in tasks completed, instructions followed, mistakes avoided. For them, time stretches and compresses unpredictably, shaped by authority rather than choice. You recognize this rhythm well. It still lingers in your body, nearby. A public house hums softly with conversation inside. Time loosens its grip. Drinks are poured without strict schedules. Stories unfold at their own pace. A wall clock ticks overhead, often ignored, its steady reminder of passing hours politely dismissed. Here, time is something to be shared, not controlled. You think of how rarely the elite consider the labor behind their clocks. They admire the finished object, not the months of careful filing, polishing, and adjustment that brought it into being. They speak of accuracy as an expectation, not an achievement. This is not cruelty, merely distance. The world allows them to remain unaware. Back in the workshop, time is intimate. You feel it in your fingers, in the slow ache of concentration, in the patience required to correct an error, too small for most eyes to notice. A second gained or lost matters there, not as an abstraction, but as a responsibility. The clock does not forgive carelessness, no matter who will eventually own it. As you continue walking, the street narrows, the buildings leaning closer together. The sound of your steps becomes more pronounced. Somewhere above, a household clock strikes again, slightly out of sync with the one before it. This lack of unity is common. There is no single, unquestioned time yet. Only approximations negotiated quietly between neighborhoods and professions. This fragmentation does not trouble you. If anything, it feels honest. Time, as you know better than most, is always being adjusted, balanced, compensated for. Perfect uniformity exists only as an ideal, never as reality. You pause briefly, listening to the layered chorus of bells across the city. Each marks the hour with confidence, even when they disagree. Together, they form a rough harmony. Imperfect, but persistent, London lives within this sound, structured by it without being ruled entirely. The elite will sleep tonight beneath finely crafted cases, reassured by the presence of accurate time. Others will sleep without clocks at all, rising when light and habit allow. And you, somewhere between these worlds, will return to your bench tomorrow, translating motion into meaning once again. As you turn back toward the workshop, the street already feels quieter. The contrast fades, replaced by familiarity. As night deepens, the workshop becomes a world unto itself, sealed off from the layered hierarchies of the city outside. Here, the sharp distinctions between merchant and noble, apprentice and master, begin to lose their edge. All that remains is rhythm. The clocks don't recognize rank or wealth. They respond only to balance, tension, and release, repeating their motions with unwavering loyalty to their design. I sit again at my bench, my body settling into a posture it knows well. The wood beneath my elbows is smooth, worn down by years of use, still holding a faint warmth from the day. The lamp casts a perfect circle of light, leaving the corners of the room in gentle shadow. Within this illuminated space, time feels close, almost tangible, as if I could reach out and hold it in my hands. Each clock contributes its own voice to the room's quiet symphony. Some tick with a sharp, crisp clarity, like a tiny silver bell. Others have a softer, more rounded sound, a gentle, woody thump. Together, they form a layered cadence, a complex rhythm that is neither chaotic nor perfectly synchronized. It's strangely calming, a constant reminder that uniformity isn't required for harmony. The workshop breathes in seconds and exhales in minutes. I can't help but think how different this experience is from the way time is encountered. In the grand homes of the elite, there, a clock is a solitary object, a piece of art to be admired from a distance. But here, they are my companions. I know their individual habits, their little quirks. There's the one that runs just a bit fast when the room gets warm, another that prefers a longer, more graceful pendulum arc, and the temperamental one, over in the corner. That requires frequent reassurance in the form of careful, tiny adjustments. This intimacy, this deep understanding, is not shared by those who eventually own the finished pieces. For them, the clock's presence is symbolic. It represents order, refinement, reliability. They trust it implicitly, rarely questioning how it achieves such perfect steadiness. but I am always aware of how easily the trust could be broken. How a single fraction of imbalance could disrupt everything. A misplaced grain of dust, a screw turned a hair too far, that's all it takes. Slowly, the hypnotic effect of the ticking begins to take hold. My breathing slows, unconsciously aligning itself with the dominant rhythm in the room. The day's worries, the deadlines, the demanding customers, they all lose their urgency. Tasks that felt demanding just hours ago now unfold naturally, guided more by muscle memory than deliberate thought. This is the quiet, focused state where my best work happens. It's a trance-like flow where my hands seem to know exactly what to do, independent of my conscious mind. Outside, the great city of London continues to turn restlessly in its sleep. Somewhere, a watchman's call echoes faintly, a lonely cry quickly swallowed by stone walls and foggy distance. A late carriage rattles past, its wheels briefly interrupting the city's quieter hours. But these sounds reach me only as softened impressions, their insistence stripped away. They are a part of a world that feels very far away from this bench. Within the workshop, time is no longer a tool of control or a marker of obligation. It becomes something closer to an atmosphere, like the air I breathe or the light I work by. I don't chase it, and it doesn't pressure me. It simply is, steady, available, offering itself for quiet observation. I think of how rarely people of privilege experience time this way. Their days are segmented by appointments and social engagements, their nights cushioned by comfort and servants. Time serves them, announcing itself politely with chimes on the hour and retreating when ignored. For me, it is less accommodating, but also more honest. It demands respect. The repetitive motions of my hands lifting a tiny tool, turning a minuscule screw, setting it aside mirror the repetitive motions inside the clocks themselves. There is a quiet, profound satisfaction in this symmetry. Human effort and mechanical movement echoing one another, each dependent on consistency, not on fleeting moments of inspiration. It's about discipline, about showing up, about doing the work. Fatigue arrives gradually, without drama or complaint. My shoulders begin to relax, dropping from their tense working posture. My focus, once laser sharp, softens at the edges. This, too, is part of the rhythm. I've learned not to resist it. A tired hand makes mistakes, and mistakes, even small ones, are costly in this world of precision. Knowing when to pause is just as important as knowing when to continue. I lean back slightly in my chair, letting the layered sound of the ticking wash over me. The clocks don't rush. They never urge me onward. Their patience is absolute, extending far beyond a single night or even a single lifetime. It is a humbling thought that many of these mechanisms will continue their steady labor long after I am gone. Their ticking carried forward by others who understand their intricate language. This thought doesn't trouble me. Instead, it brings a muted sense of belonging. I am part of a long, unbroken chain of careful hands, each craftsman contributing a small part of their life before stepping aside. The elite may pass their clocks down as family heirlooms, symbols of their lineage, but the real legacy, the knowledge of how to keep them alive, passes more quietly, from one workshop to the next, from master to apprentice. The oil lamp on my bench flickers once, a brief dance of shadow, then steadies. The shadows on the walls shift subtly. Time, the essence of this room, responds to these tiny changes without comment, adjusting itself as it always does. I reach forward and make a small correction to a gear train, a movement so slight it would be invisible to an untrained eye. But the effect is immediate, a subtle shift in the ticking audible only to me. Balance is restored. In this enclosed world, status dissolves completely. There is only accuracy and error, patience and haste. The clocks care nothing for the city's concerns, its politics, its ambitions. They ask only to be understood and respected, and I offer them both, night after night, without any expectation of recognition or reward beyond the work itself. As the hypnotic rhythm continues, my thoughts grow lighter, less defined. The boundaries between minutes begin to blur. I am no longer measuring time so much as inhabiting it, swimming in its steady current. This is the quiet privilege of my craft, something that cannot be purchased at any price or inherited through a noble bloodline. It must be earned, right here, at this bench. Eventually, the need for rest becomes undeniable. My body tells me it's time. I prepare to extinguish the lamp, confident that the clocks will continue their faithful work without my watch fly. They always do, as darkness settles more fully into the workshop. Their ticking remains. The moment arrives quietly, almost unnoticed at first. One clock lifts its voice, then another, and another still, until the workshop fills with the layered resonance of striking hours. The sound is not perfectly unified. Each mechanism announces the time according to its own internal agreement with the world. Yet together, they create a broad, enveloping presence, a collective acknowledgement that another hour has passed. You stand still as the sound unfolds. This is not something to rush through. The striking is both an ending and a beginning, a soft punctuation mark in the long sentence of the night. The vibrations travel through wood, stone, and metal, briefly animating the space before fading back into stillness in grand houses across the city. Similar sounds are heard, though in a very different way. There, the hour is marked by a single, authoritative clock, its tone carefully chosen to be pleasant and restrained. The sound drifts through carpeted halls, prompting subtle adjustments in behavior, servants preparing trays, household members turning toward bed, lamps being lowered. Here, the experience is less polished and more complete. The strikes overlap, contradict, and then settle. You do not correct them immediately. Precision matters, but so does patience. Time does not demand instant agreement. It allows for gradual alignment. You think of how the elite rely on one clock to set the rhythm of an entire household. Its authority is rarely questioned. If it runs slow, the house runs slow. If it runs fast, everyone adjusts without complaint. Time, in those spaces, is centralized and quietly enforced. In the workshop, authority is distributed. Each clock maintains its own voice. Your role is not to dominate them, but to listen. You learn their tendencies over days and weeks, understanding how temperature, humidity, and where shape their behavior. This attentiveness is invisible to those who will eventually own them. Outside, church bells add their voices to the night. Their sound reaches you faintly, filtered by distance and walls. They demark the hour, though with far less concern for accuracy. Their purpose is communal rather than precise, a shared reminder rather than a measurement. The contrast is striking, though never dramatic. Public time and private time overlap imperfectly, coexisting without true synchronization. London has learned to live with this, so have you. Absolute agreement is not required for life to continue as the echoes fade. The workshop settles into a deeper quiet. The ticking resumes its dominance, now enriched by the memory of sound. Your breathing slows again, matching the most consistent rhythm in the room. Fatigue deepens, but it does so gently, without resistance. You move among the clocks, checking a few by habit rather than necessity. Your fingers hover near dials and cases, not touching, merely confirming presence. These machines are both fragile and resilient, capable of lasting decades if treated with respect. You imagine how differently this moment unfolds in elite chambers. There, the striking of the hour is often followed by stillness, doors closing, fires damp, conversations ending. Time there signals withdrawal, a retreat into comfort and rest. For you, the hour does not command. It suggests you are free to continue or to stop, guided by awareness rather than obligation. This autonomy is rare, even if it comes wrapped in long hours and quiet strain. The night air cools the room slightly. You notice the effect immediately, hearing subtle changes in the clock's voices. Metal contracts, pendulums respond. Time adjusts itself in response to the environment, never static, always negotiating. This responsiveness reminds you why mastery over time is an illusion. Even the finest mechanisms remain subject to the world around them. Humidity, temperature, and gravity all have their say. Precision is always provisional. The elite may believe their clocks grant them control, but you know better. What they purchase is not dominance over time, but a carefully maintained conversation with it, one that requires constant attention, even if that attention is outsourced to hands like yours. As the workshop grows darker, you extinguish one lamp, then another. The shadows deepen, but the ticking persists, now more pronounced in the absence of light. Sound replaces sight as the primary guide. You sit for a moment in near darkness, listening. The clocks do not need to be seen to be understood. Their rhythm fills the space, completely, leaving little room for thought. This, too, is a kind of rest. Outside, the city continues to sleep unevenly, shaped by wealth, labor, and chance. Inside, time remains steady, impartial, and quietly generous. The hour has been marked. Nothing else is required as you prepare to surrender fully to the night. The workshop holds you in its measured embrace, each second arriving and departing without urgency. The city reaches its quietest state, not all at once, but by degrees. Sound withdraws slowly, leaving behind a thinner atmosphere, easier to breathe in the workshop. You can sense this change without even needing to look outside. The ticking of the clocks feels louder now, not because it's grown in strength, but because there's so little left to compete with it. London's wealthiest quarters are already at rest. Heavy curtains block out the streets. Fires settle into glowing embers, and tall clocks stand watch, their dials catching the faintest light. In these rooms, time is trusted to behave itself. It's not monitored, only assumed. Sleep arrives under the quiet assurance that morning will come when expected. Elsewhere, sleep is more fragile, in narrow rooms and crowded dwellings. Rest is interrupted by shared walls, uneven floors, and lingering noise. Time there isn't marked by fine mechanisms, but by exhaustion. The night ends not when a clock declares it, but when the body can no longer remain still. You remain awake, suspended between these two worlds. The workshop doesn't belong to the sleeping city, yet it's no longer part of its waking life. It occupies a narrow interval where attention fades, but awareness persists. This is the hour when the contrast between lives becomes most apparent. You think of the owners who will one day receive the clocks around you. They'll place them carefully in rooms designed to impress and reassure. The ticking will become part of the household's identity, a subtle declaration of order and refinement. Few will consider the nights like this one, when time was coaxed into reliability through patience and repetition. The street outside is nearly silent now, even the watchman's. Calls have grown less frequent, his voice carrying farther in the still air. The city appears to rest, though you know it never fully does. Somewhere, fires are tended. Somewhere, someone wakes unexpectedly. Time continues its quiet work regardless. Inside, the clocks remain awake. Their endurance feels almost human in its constancy, though it's nothing of the sort. They don't tire, don't reflect, don't hesitate. Their persistence is mechanical, yet comforting in its predictability. You move carefully through the darkened room, guided by sound rather than sight. Each step is measured, instinctively cautious, as though you might disturb the rhythm by moving too quickly. The floorboards creak softly, then fall silent again. This awareness of movement extends to your thoughts. They slow down, growing less distinct, less demanding. The concerns of the day no longer press for resolution. There will be time for them later. For now, there is only this present moment, stretched gently by repetition. You consider how rare. This experience is for those whose lives are structured by privilege. Their nights are protected, their rest uninterrupted. Time doesn't intrude upon their sleep. It guards it. For you, time remains audible even in rest. A constant companion rather than a distant servant. Yet there's no bitterness in this realization. The workshop offers its own form of shelter within its walls. You are free from the expectations of both wealth and poverty. Your responsibility is narrow but deep, defined by care rather than status. The clocks tick on. Indifferent to the lives they will eventually regulate, they will measure hours of work and leisure, of celebration and grief, without discrimination. This impartiality feels important. though you can't quite say why. Outside, the first hint of dawn is still far away. The night holds its ground, cool and steady. Time moves forward without announcing itself, each second identical to the last in form, if not in meaning. You sit once more, allowing the sound to envelop you. The workshop feels less like a place of labor now and more like a vessel carrying you through the night. The rhythm doesn't push you towards sleep. It simply makes sleep possible. The elite will wake to clocks that have kept a faithful watch through the dark. They'll trust these mechanisms, without question, confident in the continuity they provide. You will know exactly how the trust was earned. As the night deepens, your awareness begins to drift. The ticking blends into a continuous presence, no longer separable into individual sounds. Time becomes a texture rather than a measurement. In this state, distinctions lose their importance. Day and night, work and rest, ownership and labor, all of it softens at the edges. What remains is movement, steady and unbroken. You close your eyes briefly, not yet surrendering fully to sleep, but allowing yourself to rest within the rhythm you have helped create. The city sleeps unevenly beyond the walls, but here, time remains balanced. Soon, the final transition will come, gentle and unremarkable. Until then, the clocks continue their quiet vigil, marking the passage of hours that belong to everyone and to no one at all. Eventually, the distinction between listening and resting dissolves. The ticking sounds that once arrived as individual, distinct beats now begin to merge, flowing together into a continuous field of sound. It's no longer a series of separate moments you are counting, but a gentle, humming current that seems to carry you forward without any effort on your part. You are still aware of it, this chorus of tiny mechanisms, but only faintly. In the same way you are aware of your own quiet breathing or the distant, comforting weight of gravity holding you in place. It's a presence that doesn't demand your attention, but simply exists alongside you. Time, which demanded such careful, meticulous attention throughout the long hours of the day, finally loosens its grip. The urgency to measure, to correct, to align, has completely evaporated. The workshop itself seems to expand in the dim light, not because its physical walls have moved, but because your own awareness has softened its sharp edges. The hard corners of the room blur into deep, soft shadows. The benches, laden with tools and disassembled clocks, and the neat rows of patient, finished timepieces all recede slightly, as if they are respectfully giving you space to finally rest. Nothing here requires your immediate action anymore. The day's labor is done. Everything that needed correction has been corrected, every gear oiled, every spring set. At least for this night, the relentless pursuit of precision has found its conclusion, and a sense of quiet completion settles over the room. There is a deep satisfaction in the stillness, a feeling that the work has been good and the day has been earned. You are no longer the master of these machines. You are simply a fellow occupant of this quiet, rhythmic space. You think, briefly and without any sense of urgency, of the long, winding path that brought you to this very moment, to this specific night in this particular workshop. You recall the years spent learning to see the infinitesimal imperfections that others overlook, the subtle nuances in a tick or a tock, the immense discipline required to train your hands, to teach them to move with a powerful restraint, to make adjustments so fine they are almost invisible. Your mind drifts over the countless hours passed in quiet, unwavering concentration, measuring progress in fractions of seconds and movements so small they barely register in memory. These thoughts pass through you gently, like clouds drifting across a calm sky. They don't demand a response or an evaluation. They are simply memories, fragments of a life dedicated to a singular craft, and they float by without disturbing the profound peace that has begun to settle deep within you. It's a quiet acknowledgement of the journey, not a review of it. Each memory is a soft echo of effort and dedication, now fading into the larger tranquility of the night. Beyond the frosted glass of your workshop window, the great city of London remains asleep, though its slumber is uneven and varied. In the grand houses of the wealthy, magnificent clocks continue their silent, stoic guardianship. their gilded hands sweeping across porcelain faces, trusted implicitly to divide the darkness of night from the first light of morning. Their owners rest, secure in the order these timepieces provide. In more modest rooms, in the countless homes of the working folk, people sleep without any reference to hours or minutes, guided instead by the simple, honest dictates of exhaustion and ingrained habit. Across the vast, sprawling city, millions of lives unfold at different distances from the concept of time. For some, it is a resource to be managed and maximized. For others, a pressure that never relents. Yet all are carried by its unceasing current, whether they are aware of it or not. You, however, inhabit a rarer, more intimate position. You have spent your waking hours not just living within time, but actively shaping its behavior, persuading it to move more evenly, more reliably, more truthfully. You are a negotiator, a caretaker of its passage. Now, as the deep promise of rest finally approaches, you release that immense responsibility. You let go of the need to control, to perfect. The clocks will continue their work without you. They always have, and they always will. Their steady rhythm is a testament to their own endurance, a quality you have only helped to reveal and refine. This surrender does not feel like failure or defeat. It feels earned. It is a necessary and welcome release, the final, crucial step in the day's work, the delicate balance you sought all day, the perfect equilibrium between tension and release in the heart of a clock. No longer belongs only to the intricate mechanisms on your bench. It is settled into you as well. Your own breathing, without any conscious effort, aligns naturally with the dominant, composite rhythm in the room. Slow dot, steady dot, UNFO or CED. Each inhale and exhale finds its place within the broader symphony of ticking, creating a harmony between the living and the mechanical. The faint, familiar scent of machine oil and cool metal lingers in the air. It's a smell that might be jarring to others, but to you, it is deeply reassuring. It is the smell of work completed, of problems solved, of care taken with the utmost seriousness. It is the aroma of your craft, a tangible reminder of the day's purpose. But even this sensory detail begins to fade as your focus drifts further inward, away from the external world and into the quiet landscape of your own mind. The world simplifies, narrowing gently and gracefully toward a point of complete stillness. Time continues to pass, of course. It never stops, but it no longer announces itself with such demanding urgency. Seconds slip by without demanding your recognition. Minutes stretch comfortably, becoming indistinct from one another, losing their sharp delineations. This is the very same process your clocks perform, turning the chaotic flow of existence into a measured, predictable sequence. Only now, you experience it from within, as a participant rather than an observer. You imagine, vaguely, the morning that will inevitably come. You see the first light returning to the shop, not the warm gold of sunset, but a cooler, crisper shade of blue. The clocks will still be ticking, faithful and unchanged by the night's passage. You will listen to them again, evaluate their performance, and perhaps adjust a mechanism here or there. The cycle of work will resume, but without drama, without anxiety. It is a known and comforting pattern. For now, however, there is no need to anticipate that moment. The night is complete in itself. It does not hurry toward the dawn. It simply exists, held together by the power of repetition and quiet, unwavering endurance. The elite may believe that owning an expensive clock grants them comfort and control over time. The laboring people of the city may feel time as a constant pressure, a scarcity that dictates their lives. But you know it differently. Through years of intimate work, you have learned that time is neither a possession to be owned nor an adversary to be conquered. It is a companion demanding and meticulous when approached closely, but generous and forgiving when allowed to run its own natural course. This profound understanding settles over you like a warm, soft blanket. It is present, but not heavy. It is a comfort that is not intrusive. The chorus of ticking fades further and further into the background, becoming less a sound and more a fundamental condition of the space, like the air itself. Your body grows heavier, not with fatigue alone, but with the deep, earned permission to finally rest. The quiet vigilance held in your muscles all day long is released. Thoughts loosen their tight structures, drifting without direction, forming and dissolving like mist. There is no problem to solve here, no intricate mechanism awaiting your correction. The workshop, once a place of the most precise and focused attention, has transformed into a cradle of rhythm, a sanctuary of peace. Each clock continues its endless, selfless labor, marking time for a city that will soon begin to stir and wake again. But you do not need to witness this transition. Your part, for now, is finished. Sleep arrives not as a sudden interruption, but as a gentle continuation of the evening surrender. It is simply another rhythm joining the others, one that is slower, deeper, and more personal. You drift into it gradually, without resistance, carried by the same steady, trustworthy movement you have cultivated and trusted all along. And so, as the clocks keep their faithful watch through the remaining hours of the night, you rest deeply within the very world you help to align secure in the knowledge that time, for once, requires nothing more from you. The final moments before sleep arrive without ceremony. There is no clear boundary, no decisive shift from wakefulness to rest. Instead, your awareness thins out gradually, like fog lifting from a river at dawn, revealing less and less with each passing breath. The ticking of the clocks continues, unchanged, but your relationship to it softens. You no longer track it, you simply exist alongside it. The workshop feels older now, as though it has slipped slightly out of time. The tools on the bench carry the quiet dignity of long use. Each scratch and worn edge speaks of patience rather than haste. These objects have shaped ours, yours, entire lives, yet they sit without pride or complaint. They wait, content to be still. You sense how rare this stillness is in the wider world. The city rarely pauses long enough to notice itself. Even in sleep, it murmurs faintly, shifting and adjusting. But here, surrounded by measured motion, the night achieves a kind of balance the city rarely knows. The clocks continue their vigil, marking time not for display, but for continuity. They are not anxious about accuracy in the way we humans are. They do not fear being late or early. They simply move as they were taught, trusting the logic of their design. There is a deep comfort in this unthinking persistence. You reflect, dimly now, on how much of your own life has been shaped by restraint, the steady hand, the measured breath, the willingness to wait rather than force an outcome. These are qualities that rarely draw admiration in a loud world, yet they endure. Like the clocks themselves, they do their work quietly, reliably, without any need for spectacle. Outside, the night air cools further. Somewhere, far beyond these walls, the river continues its slow passage, indifferent to hours and ownership alike. Time moves differently there, guided by gravity rather than by gears. You find this thought soothing rather than unsettling. It as a reminder that our own frameworks are just one way of experiencing the flow of existence. The idea of morning drifts through your thoughts, indistinct and unformed. It doesn't demand preparation. When it comes, it will announce itself gently, with light rather than with sound. Until then, there is absolutely nothing required of you. Your breathing deepens. Each inhale feels unhurried, each exhale complete. The alignment you sought all day, the delicate balance between motion and stillness, tension and release has finally found its way into your body. You are no longer trying to maintain it. You are simply resting within it. The ticking fades further into the background, no longer separable into individual voices. It becomes a soft, continuous hum, like rain heard from inside a sheltered room. It's present, reassuring, and so very easily ignored. Time does not disappear. It simply loosens its grip. Across the city, in elite homes, grand clocks will continue to perform their role as silent guarantors of order. In crowded rooms, people will sleep without any reference to the hours at all. Countless lives will drift through the night in their own different ways, each one carried forward by the same invisible current. But here, in the small, measured space, You experience time without urgency or ambition. It is not something to be conquered or optimized. It is something to be lived alongside, moment by moment, without resistance. Your thoughts grow quieter, less distinct. Memories don't form clearly enough to hold on to. Plans dissolve before they can even take shape, and this absence feels natural, even necessary. The mind, like any intricate mechanism, requires periods of rest to remain true. The workshop no longer feels like a place of labor. It feels like a shelter built not from stone and wood alone, but from rhythm and repetition. Each second passes, and then it releases you from the need to notice it. Sleep approaches not as a sudden darkness, but as a growing depth. It's a gradual sinking into comfort, guided by familiarity rather than by exhaustion. You do not fall into it. You drift, carried gently by the same steady motion you have trusted all along. And so the night continues, with the clocks marking hours that no longer concern you. Time moves forward without your guidance, proving what you have always known deep down, that even the most carefully measured world can afford to let go. In the surrender, there is no loss of control, there is only rest.